This is Dave Buse. I met him about a year and a half ago at a workshop on, what was that about? Writ of mandamus.
Right.
Patty Schaefer organized a writ of mandamus workshop so that if the government doesn't give us the records we request, we can fill out a writ of mandamus, which is a order compelling them to do their job, which would be the answer to everything.
That's right.
We could get them going. And Dave's been working on some constitutional issues, and we talked about it a couple weeks ago a little bit more in depth, and I thought the subject of bond needs to be covered because it comes up again and again, and also maybe we can flesh out what's the difference between legal and lawful, and then we'll start with the subject of the lawsuit that you're a helper. 126 of you are helping 2 gentlemen bring a lawsuit against the government, and then you've got a thing going against the government here in your county concerning taxes primarily, but I'm sure other things are involved. And I guess other things have come up as a result of that.
Definitely.
Yeah, including your unlawful incarceration. So, does that about cover it?
Yeah, that's pretty close to what we're talking about. There's several things we're going to touch on tonight, and first of all, we wanted to discuss what a bond is. For those of you who do not know and who do not have it, I suggest you get a copy of Black's Law Dictionary. The 5th edition, they tell me, is the best. The one we're looking at here is the 8th edition, and we have tried to decipher why it is that lawyers need their own dictionaries for wording, and why it isn't shared with other like Webster. And we've come to the conclusion it is so the lawyers can screw you out of what's lawful, to say the least.
By using a whole nother language which is legal.
By using a whole new language that most people aren't even familiar with. And if you take into consideration there are now 8 volumes of Black's Law, there must have been a lot of changes made by the legal institutions to where they needed to restructure the meaning of words. And restructure of words, ladies and gentlemen, is how they screw you out of what's lawful. So we need to understand that when you're talking, you are talking with an attorney, and he is using words that you do not understand. You need to have him pull Black's Law's dictionary down and explain those to you. I have written several documents relating to different terminology. Banks, in particular, are very good, as well as the IRS, at terminology. And they use wording, which is fraud in the inducement and fraud by trickery, to get you to sign documents. For example, perjury. I do solemnly swear under penalty of perjury that the statement made above is true. Look up the meaning of the word perjury. It's verbal testimony. So how can you give verbal testimony if it's written? So you need to understand the terminology that these people use. Yeah.
What does fraud in the inducement mean?
Fraud in the inducement means that they had full knowledge of a writing in legal terms, which they withheld information from the general public in order to get them to perform in a way to their benefit. The withholding of information to cause someone to act to his detriment is fraud. The IRS code is totally written in fraud. There are 60 rulings of the United States Supreme Court excuse me, which are not in the IRS code. all 60 of these benefit you and I as a taxpayer and not the IRS. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, the IRS is not even a government agency.
Well, let's do the bond thing. That's
okay. A bond is an obligation, a promise. An obligation, or in English, a bond is a document written and sealed containing a confession of a debt. In later times, contract is genius, obligation. There are the Pollock versus Frederick W. Midland is the History of English Law 207, second edition, 1899. They pretty much explain to you what a bond is in here: a written promise to pay money or to do some act if certain circumstances occur or a certain time elapses. A promise that feasible upon a condition subsequent, an instrument under seal by which a public officer undertakes to pay the sum of money if he or she does not faithfully discharge a responsibility of office. That's why your elected officials are responsible to post bonds, some of them. Anyone who's elected to office and takes an oath must post bond. Okay?
And that means they put up a certain amount of money that they'll only get back if they do a good job, if they do their job?
Right. It protects the citizen against unlawful expenditures of money, that kind of thing.
Huh.
Okay, so if they're in violation of oath and bond, that means they can have their bond arrested and forfeited. Basically, they're out of office.
Right, because they can't post bond.
That's right. Because once their bond is called, that goes to the person who arrested the bond.
Citizens or...
That's right, whoever. It could be a corporation or a person, an individual, I should say. So it is a surety which undertakes that if the public officer does not do so, the surety will be liable in the penal sum. So in other words, he forfeits the entire bond to whoever he defrauded or whatever.
For any amount, if you defraud him for $100?
It's up to the total amount of his bond, and if you feel that's not enough, then you can take legal action in civil court to get even more.
How much is typical bonds
I'm thinking it depends on the office, really. So you may have a public service with, say, a $500,000 bond or $1 million bond, and they can go up to several $1 million depending on what group you're talking to. So judges are extremely high. Judges are really high. Their bonds.
If a judge was found guilty of defrauding someone of $500, would their whole $1 million bond?
They can actually call the whole bond.
How often
because
does that
that's
happen?
up to the individual who was frauded in his court. And see, that's what one of my cases is about right now. The judge claimed to be a judge of the Common Pleas Court. Well, we know that in 1933, the federal government turned all statutes over to the international law, and then in 1945, all government agencies were turned over to the UN. So what we have in America today are not state courts, they're administrative courts.
And that's why the gold fringe around the flag.
That's right. A international court flies a gold fringe flag. So when you walk into any court that's supposedly being represented as a state court, that's a fraud.
And the flag proves it.
Yes, it does. An Ohio Common Pleas Court should have a standard Ohio flag and a U.S. flag apiece flying next to it. That would be a standard Ohio court.
And what's the U.S. flag apiece?
That's the flag that runs this way with the V shape, the stars and stripes.
Oh, really?
And then the stripes run this way on it, but it comes down in a V and then. So that's the U.S. flag apiece.